Our brains are trying to recreate stories for us. In the last video, I said that we often take a specific incident and then generalize out. And we do this all the time. Oftentimes though, it's when something bad happens and then we generalize out. We can use this though to change something that is already negative to change it to feeling good. But there's two roadblocks from having that happen. The first roadblock is that we have a tendency to recreate stories in our lives. We recreate these unfinished stories trying to get to a resolution, often subconsciously, right? We're not actively thinking about these things, but we find ourselves in similar situations time and time again, and we wonder, why do I always end up like this? And sometimes it's blatant and we know it, and sometimes we don't even notice it in the moment. It's like one of your friends that ends up dating the same type of person over and over again, and every time they end up in the same type of relationship pattern and they don't even see it, but from the outside looking in, you see it and you notice it, and even when you tell them, they're like, no, that's not really the thing, it was X, Y, and Z instead, and not this recurring pattern. So with this thing, if you don't change that story and how you emotionally react to it, then there's a part of you that will continue working towards this path that probably isn't great, right? It's not a path that is great and is supporting you. But this part wants you this time to finally get the ending that you've always wanted, right? That's often what is happening in this. It's trying to get that resolution to the story because it wants the ending that it never got. It wants the love from this person when you were younger, and so it recreates these relationship patterns so that now you can finally get the love from that person. But in the real world, in the now and here, that's an awful way to get that love. And if it's not in relationship patterns, it's sometimes patterns that we have with our habits, right? So say that you go on a diet. It's your second day on a diet and you decide that you're gonna go into this situation that you know is super tempting for you. You're going to go to your favorite restaurant with one of your best friends where you always eat a bunch of food and have this dessert. And it's your second day on the diet and you put yourself in this tempting situation. And the question is, why would you do that right now? And I don't know why, but here's a story that I came up with that I could see playing out, especially if it's something that has happened time and again. It's because there's a part of you that finally wants to prove to yourself, aka your mother or someone from your past, that you have self-control. Because when you were younger, one time you were eating cookies, your mother was like, you have no self-control, you have no discipline. Ever since then, there's a part of you that wants to prove that you do have self-control and self-discipline. And so you put yourself in these situations that cause you to exert this crazy amount of self-control and self-discipline just so that you can prove them right. So you end up trying to recreate that story. That's the first problem. So the first block with changing something from negative to good so that you can take that specific incident and generalize it out is that we often tend to recreate our stories and they get into repetitive loops. That's the first block. The second block is that even when you make those positive changes, right? You go to that restaurant on your second day on the diet and you actually eat a salad and eat healthy and don't eat the dessert. What happens is your brain discounts the positive. It completely forgets it or sees it as a one-off, right? So you're not taking that specific incident and generalizing it out. Logically, you should be at a place where now you've completed the story and you shouldn't want to put yourself back in that repetitive loop. But your brain discounts the positive, or it might say something like, well, that was a fluke. Next time you won't have that self-control, right? Like you just did what you tried to prove to yourself and it still discounted it. Instead of seeing the good, a part of you is still stuck there. That no matter what you did, it will never be good enough. Which brings us to the concept of this week. We need to bring peace and emotional understanding to that part for it to be able to move on. We need to be able to see, understand, and hear that story so that we can accept that story, and by understanding that story we can finally move on. We break these repetitive cycles, and so that now we can have that positive change and actually generalize it out. Here's the thing, the stories don't have to be completed out there in the real world. All the stories can be done by yourself here, now, by yourself, all in your head, right? Like these parts just want to be heard mostly by you, right? They don't need anyone else. They just need to be seen and heard by you, which is what the heart of the story exercise is getting towards. Because if you can change how that part emotionally feels and bring it peace, then in doing so, you can take that specific incident of giving this part that emotional peace, and then you can generalize it out so that it no longer wants that repetitive cycle in your life.